Associate at Research and Policy Development Rapid. I, on behalf of Rapid, welcome you all to our 6th episode of our monthly webinar series, and a deep dive analytical perspectives on economic development. This episode is brought to you by Rapid in association with the UK FCDO. First of all, I'm very glad that you all are here despite the unstable internet connection and other adversities. It really proves that you're very passionate about research and learning, so we're very glad to have you here with us. Secondly, we would also like to express our heartfelt condolences to the ones who have been affected by the recent tragic events. And we at Rapid really believe that we recognize that there is a need for peaceful dialogue, and we should all value the basic human rights for all. So without further ado, let's delve into the session now. So on today's Young Economists panel discussion, we have Mr. Sami Mohammad, who is an undergrad student at the Department of Economics at Dhaka University. And we have Mr. Shihabuddin Shumon, who is a lecturer at a university in Netrokona, Bangladesh. And we also have Mr. Saad Rabsan Ali, who is a research associate at Rapid. So today's discussion is going to center around progressivity of the tax structure in Bangladesh. To moderate the session, I would request our research director, Dr. Deen Islam sir, to take it forward from here. Once again, thank you very much for joining the session. I hope that you all are going to gain some valuable insights and take some good learnings from here. Thank you so much. Over to you, Deen sir.
Thank you, Dara. তো আমাদের এই ওয়েবিনারটার মূল উদ্দেশ্য হচ্ছে যে যারা ইয়াং রিসার্চ ইকোনমিক ডেভেলপমেন্ট স্টাডিজ এবং রিলেটেড সাবজেক্টগুলোতে যারা সামাজিক বিজ্ঞান নিয়ে গবেষণা করে তাদের গবেষণাকে একটা প্ল্যাটফর্ম দেওয়া, একটা হচ্ছে যে তাদের মধ্যে একটা নেটওয়ার্কিং এর ব্যবস্থা। তো আমাদের এমনিতে জেনারেলি পেপার প্রেজেন্টেশন হয়, কিন্তু আমরা 6টা এরকম পেপার সেশনের পরে আমরা চিন্তা করলাম যে একটা প্যানেল ডিসকাশন ইয়াং ইকোনমিস্ট বা ইয়াং রিসার্চার যারা আছে যে পলিসিগুলো হচ্ছে ইম্পর্টেন্ট, যেমন ট্যাক্সেশন, প্রোগ্রেসিভিটি অফ ট্যাক্সেশন। এই পলিসিটা শুধুমাত্র এখন যে পলিসি নেওয়া হবে বা যেটা নেওয়া আছে এটা কিন্তু শুধুমাত্র এই জেনারেশন না, এর পরবর্তী কয়েকটা জেনারেশনকে এফেক্টেড করবে, অন ইনকাম ইনইকুয়ালিটি, অন ইকোনমিক গ্রোথ, অন আদার ইকোনমিক ভেরিয়েবল। তো একটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট ইস্যুতে ইয়াং রিসার্চার, ইয়াং ইকোনমিস্ট এবং ইয়াং মাইন্ড কি চিন্তা করে, কিভাবে এটা অ্যানালাইজ করে, কিভাবে প্রসেস করে এবং কিভাবে প্রেজেন্ট করে, সেটাই আজকে আমাদের উদ্দেশ্য। তো শুরু করার আগে এই বিষয়ে আমাদের সাথে আছেন আমাদের র্যাপিডের এক্সিকিউটিভ ডিরেক্টর স্যার ইউসুফ স্যার। আপনি যদি শুরু করেন কিছু এই ইয়াং রিসার্চার যারা আছে তাদের উদ্দেশ্যে আপনি বলেন, আপনার বক্তব্য দিয়ে আমরা শুরু করবো। স্যার আপনি যদি কিছু বলেন।
থ্যাংক ইউ দিন। আমার মনে হয় আমরা গত প্রায় 7 মাস পড়েছে বোধহয় এই ওয়েবিনার সিরিজটা, যেটা আমরা মান্থলি করেছি। এই প্রথম আমরা একটু ডিফারেন্ট মোডালিটিস ফলো করলাম, যে আগের দুজন প্রেজেন্টার থাকতো, তারপরে সেটার উপর ডিসকাশন হতো। এইবার আমরা একটা প্যানেল ডিসকাশনের মতো ইয়াং ইকোনমিস্ট বা ইয়াং রিসার্চারদের পার্টিসিপেশনে, তো এটা একটা আমি মনে করি একটা নিউ ডাইমেনশন, এন্ড হুইচ ইজ আমরা দেখি যে এই মডেলটাও বা কিরকম হয়। খুব ভালো লাগতো যদি, যেহেতু এখন সাম্প্রতিক একটা পরিস্থিতি আছে, না হলে আমরা ফেসবুকে লাইভ করতে পারতাম, তারপরে বিভিন্ন কারণেই যাই আমাদের এই ডিসকাশনটা অনেকটা ক্লোজ ডিসকাশনের মতো হচ্ছে। তারপরেও আমাদের যারা ইয়াং রিসার্চার আছে তারা বেনিফিটেড হবে আশা করি। এবং যারা প্যানেলিস্ট হিসেবে আছেন, আমাদের সামি মোহাম্মদ, শিয়াবুদ্দিন সুমন এবং সৈয়দ রাফসান আলী, আমি তাদেরকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই এই র্যাপিডের এই ইনিশিয়েটিভে জয়েন করার জন্য এবং কন্ট্রিবিউট করার জন্য। এবং আশা করছি তাদের যে ডিসকাশন, এই ডিসকাশনটা এমন একটা টপিক, এই টপিক ইটসেলফ ইজ ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট ফর বাংলাদেশ। কারণ আমরা যে যখন রিসোর্স মোবিলাইজেশনের কথা বলি, আমরা ট্যাক্স স্ট্রাকচারের কথা বলি, আমরা প্রগ্রেসিভিটি অফ ট্যাক্স স্ট্রাকচারের কথা বলি, আমরা ফিসক্যাল স্পেসের কথা বলি। এখন আমরা যদি ফিসক্যাল স্পেসটা বাড়াতে না পারি, তাহলে কিন্তু আমরা এডুকেশনে খরচ করতে পারবো না, হেলথে খরচ করতে পারবো না, সোশ্যাল প্রোটেকশনে খরচ করতে পারবো না। প্রয়োজনীয় যে জায়গাগুলোতে, সেই জায়গাগুলোতে ফিসক্যাল স্পেসটা ইজ ভেরি ন্যারো ফিসক্যাল স্পেস ইন দ্য কনটেক্সট অফ বাংলাদেশ, এবং ওয়ান অফ দ্য লোয়েস্ট ইন দ্য ওয়ার্ল্ড। ইভেন আমাদের যে পাবলিক এক্সপেন্ডিচার, এটা যদি আমরা জিডিপির কনটেক্সটেও দেখি, সেটা কিন্তু আমাদের যে ফিসক্যাল স্পেস বা ট্যাক্স জিডিপি রেশিও, এগুলো কিন্তু অনেক কম, আমাদের অ্যারাউন্ড 8%-এর মতো ঘুরপাক খাচ্ছি। তো সবকিছু মিলে আমি মনে করি যে আমরা যেহেতু র্যাপিড, এখানে আমরা একটা অ্যাডভোকেসি কাজ করি এবং পলিসির সাথে লিঙ্ক করার চেষ্টা করি, যে এভিডেন্স বেসড পলিসি অ্যানালিসিস। আমাদের কিছু গবেষণাও আছে যে কিভাবে ডিরেক্ট ট্যাক্সের, অর্থাৎ ট্যাক্স স্ট্রাকচারে ডিরেক্ট ট্যাক্সের কন্ট্রিবিউশনটা বাড়িয়ে কিভাবে রিসোর্স আরো বেশি পরিমাণে মোবিলাইজ করা যায়, কিভাবে ট্যাক্স নেটটা বাড়ানো যায়। তো সেই সমস্ত বিষয়ের আলোকে আজকের যে টপিক, প্রগ্রেসিভিটি অফ ট্যাক্স স্ট্রাকচার, আমি মনে করি এটা একটা খুব ভালো আলোচনা হবে। এবং তিনজন যে প্যানেলিস্ট, তারা তাদের যে মতামত দিবে, তাদের যে মন্তব্য দিবে, তাদের যে কন্ট্রিবিউশন, এখানে যারা জয়েন করেছে তারা বেনিফিটেড হবে। পাশাপাশি আমাদের যে প্রত্যেকটা ওয়েবিনারেরই একটা সামারি পয়েন্টস যেহেতু আমাদের ওয়েবসাইটে থাকে, সেখান থেকে অন্যরাও কিন্তু বেনিফিটেড হবে। এখন সরাসরি জয়েন না করলেও আমাদের এই প্ল্যাটফর্মে অনেক দেশে বিদেশের অনেকেই কিন্তু ভিজিট করে, তারা এটি একটি লাইভ ডকুমেন্ট হিসেবে থাকে। আশা করছি আমরা তারা সবাই অনেকেই এখান থেকে বেনিফিটেড হবে। আমি ডক্টর দিনকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই এইরকম একটি ওয়েবিনার সিরিজ চালিয়ে যাওয়ার জন্য, এবং যারা শহীদুল, যারা এটা অর্গানাইজ করছে, সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই। এবং প্যানেলিস্টদের আবারও ওয়েলকাম টু র্যাপিড ওয়েবিনার সিরিজ for your contribution, which is highly appreciated. Thank you. Over to Jara or Dean Islam.
Thank you, sir. তো আজকে যেমনটা স্যার বলতেছিলেন যে খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট একটা টপিক, এবং এই বিষয়ে আলোচনা করার জন্য দুজন ইয়াং রিসার্চার আমাদের সাথে আছেন। আরেকজন হয়তো জয়েন করতে পারতেছেন না, সে শিয়াবুদ্দিন সুমন জয়েন করবে। বাট আমরা আজকে যে ফরম্যাটটা ফলো করবো সেটা হচ্ছে যে আমরা প্রথমে শুনবো যারা প্যানেলিস্ট, তাদের কাছ থেকে শুনবো প্রথম 15 মিনিট থেকেই। তারা এটা সিম্পলি স্পিচ দিতে পারে অথবা পাওয়ার পয়েন্ট প্রেজেন্টেশন করতে পারে। তাদের যে পয়েন্ট গুলো, তাদের যে অ্যানালিসিস বা তাদের যে থিঙ্কিং, তাদের যে লজিক, সেটা তারা 15 মিনিট উপস্থাপন করবে। তারপরে আমরা ওপেন ফ্লোর করবো, আমরা এটা ডিসকাস করবো, ফার্দার বিষয়টা আমরা একটু ভালোভাবে বোঝার চেষ্টা করব। তা আমি আন্তরিকভাবে ধন্যবাদ জানাই সামি মোহাম্মদ এবং রাফসান, দুজন জয়েন করেছে অলরেডি। তো আমি প্রথমে সৈয়দ রাফসান আলী, র্যাপিড রিসার্চ অ্যাসোসিয়েট, আমি রাফসানকে দিয়ে শুরু করতে চাই। রাফসান, you have 15 minutes. Please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you everyone for joining. Assalamu alaikum. I am Syed Rafsan Ali. Currently, I am working as a research associate at Rapid. And first and foremost, I would like to express my deepest sorrow for the lives lost that took place during the recent incidents. And I hope we will be able to overcome this situation. So our today's discussion is the progressivity of the tax structure in Bangladesh, and it is on a very timely and crucial discussion. as we continue to navigate the challenges of economic inequality as well as the sustainable development. So, Shadul bhai, could you please enable the screen sharing?
I wanted to make you the co-host, so you can.
No. Make me the host again, please.
Okay, done.
Thank you. So, I'm assuming that apart from us, we have some friends who are from non-economic backgrounds. So I would like to shed some light on the basic three tax structures. So there are basically three types of tax structures: progressive, regressive, and proportional. So the progressive tax structure means the tax rate will increase with respect to the increase in the income level. That means if I earn a higher income, if I earn more, then I'll pay more taxes. Oppositely, the regressive tax structure basically indicates that the lower income group of people will pay the higher taxes. And apart from these two, there is another one, which is proportional tax structure. That means it doesn't have any, it is for every group of income, there is a fixed tax rate. So all will pay the fixed rate. And progressive tax, so here we'll talk about the progressive tax, and this is one of the ideal way to tackle the inequality. This means that individuals and businesses who earn higher income will pay more to the taxes in order to add the value into the social welfare as well. So let me show you a graph. So here, this graph basically tells us the current economic inequality in income inequality in Bangladesh. So here I have I have got this data from the Household Income and Expenditure Survey. So this graph basically shows the income share held by the poorest 5% household versus the richest 5% household. And we can clearly see after the year 2010, the gap has significantly increased. And it is also true that the income has also increased, but the inequality also, and it has been already proved by the recent, and it is one of the concerning issue that our recent Gini coefficient has reached almost 0.49. So, okay. And this is one of the typical graph that makes us happy sometimes. And this upward trend sometimes seems very fascinating to us. And it is true that the NPR tax revenue has been increasing over time, but there are some stories lies behind it. And Bangladesh is the second lowest country in terms of the tax to GDP ratio in South Asia, and it is still lower than the average tax GDP ratio. Bangladesh tax to GDP ratio is 7.6%, whereas the average tax to GDP ratio in South Asia is 19. So let me split this image. Yeah, it is true that our total tax revenue has increased over time, but you can clearly see here that most of indirect taxation holds a significant portion of share in government revenue collection. And if I show you the recent breakdown of the revenue collection, see here we can see that the value-added tax and other taxes, which is considered as the indirect taxes, has almost 67% of the total revenue, whereas the personal income tax has only 13%. And it proves that Bangladesh is heavily relies on the Bangladesh revenue collection is heavily relies on the indirect taxation. So here I will show you some of our analysis which we have conducted in research in Rapid. So we used household income and expenditure survey dataset for round of household income and expenditure survey datasets. So from there, we calculated the average VAT burden. And it basically means that the share of VAT in terms of the share of household income. So we can see that the lower poverty line group bears the highest level of VAT burden. And upper poverty line bears the lowest level of VAT burden in every year since 2005. And we have already seen that the VAT comprises the significant share of our revenue collection. And from these 4 rounds of data sets, we have also conducted another analysis. Here we calculated the district-wise VAT burden using the Household Income and Expenditure Survey data 2016. So if we notice carefully, that time we'll be able to see that the area where the poverty rate, the right one basically indicates the poverty map, and the left one is the average VAT burden. It reflects the district-wise average VAT burden. And if we look carefully, that time we will be able to see that the area where the poverty is higher, the average VAT burden also is higher in that area. But let's consider Dhaka. The VAT burden was supposed to be higher in Dhaka, but we can see that the VAT burden is higher in the Rangpur area. And in 2016, HIS 2016, Rangpur division was the most poor division, was considered as the most poor division. So I have shown you some data using 4 household income and expenditure survey. And now I'd like to show you a cross-country analysis. So this is basically this scatter plot basically showing a strong negative correlations between the indirect taxation of total tax revenue and log per capita GDP. So we can clearly see that the countries with high indirect tax burden has lower GDP. And if I compare Bangladesh with our neighboring country, let's see, Bangladesh has the highest indirect taxation, and India is almost nearby Bangladesh. However, the log per capita GDP is higher in India compared to Bangladesh. So it is also globally proved that indirect taxation creates the inequality. So considering all of these issues, we can say that the tax structure in Bangladesh is rarely progressive. Indeed, it is highly regressive. And there are some reasons behind this. For example, I would like to cite a document which has been released a few days ago by NBR that in fiscal year 2023-24, the NBR has targeted to achieve 4,30,000 crore taka as a government revenue. It was the initial, and after that, NBR revised it to 4,10,000 taka. But at the end of the year, NBR collected 3,87,000 crore taka as a government revenue. And this is one of the crucial issues after the foreign reserve and sports at this current moment. So we should address this as soon as possible. And there are few reasons behind this lower direct tax and higher indirect taxation. For example, our tax base is not fully utilized. So there are lots of informal sectors which is not recorded. And for that, we need to we should utilize the tax, India should utilize the tax burden, tax base properly. Also, the monitoring should be more strong. And at the same time, another thing that we can do right now, we should lower the tax rate for the necessity goods, so that the poorer can get relief from the higher tax burden. So this was my overall talk so far, and hope to hear from you. Thank you. Hello.
Sorry, I was muted. So thank you, Ramsan, for your talk. You explained the idea of progressivity of taxation and also the current state of taxation plan. The income-wide discrimination or inequality, especially inequality, there's a different dimension of inequality. And whether the current tax structure is addressing those inequality is a concern. So this is the main point I take the main takeaway from it all. So let me now move to Sami Mohammed. Sami, can you hear me?
Sir, could you hold on for a minute, sir? I'm having a little bit trouble with my volume, sir.
So
Just
if
a
you
minute.
want, I think Shia can also join.
Assalamualaikum, sir. Can you hear me?
Shia, we can hear you.
Sir,
Is everything okay? In Netrokona?
right now, no, sir. I am in Bagarhat, sir.
Oh, you are in Bagirha.
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
university is closed, right?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, thank you, Shia. Sami, if you are having technical issues, we can start with Shia and you can say that. So I think Sami dropped out. So okay, then let's move to Shihab. Shihab, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you. Am I clear?
Okay.
Loud and
Yeah.
clear?
Yes. Thank you. Sami, let's hold on for a minute. Try to resolve the technical issue. Let us hear from Shihabuddin Sumon. He is a faculty member of Economics Department at Metropolitan University. Shihab, you have about 15 minutes, and you know that the topic of panel discussion is progressivity of taxation, especially in Bangladesh context. So please, next 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
তুমি বাংলা ইংরেজি whatever medium you prefer.
Sir, can you see my screen?
না এখন দেখা যাচ্ছে
Can you see my screen?
দেখা যাচ্ছে
Okay. Can you see the slide, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So today's webinar is all about progressivity of tax structure in Bangladesh. I have tried to make a slide on this topic with my little learning and all the materials that I can collect from the different sources. Okay. Very first of all, we need to know what is tax, and in brief, we can say tax, the word came from a Latin word taxito, and the meaning of this Latin word is to determine the payable quantum on state. On the other hand, if we talk about the definition of tax, then we can say tax is the amount which is paid to the government to live in a well-functioning society. সো এখান থেকে আমরা বুঝতে পারছি যে বেসিক্যালি ট্যাক্সটা আমরা হচ্ছে সরকারকে দেই যাতে সরকার হচ্ছে একটা ওয়েল ফাংশনিং সোসাইটিটাকে আমাদেরকে এনশিওর করতে পারে। পরবর্তীতে যদি আসি তাহলে আমরা প্রথমে দেখতে চাই হচ্ছে ক্লাসিফিকেশন, আসলে ট্যাক্সটাকে কত ভাগে ভাগ করা হয়েছে। তো এখানে বেসিক্যালি তিনটা বেজের উপর ভিত্তি করে ক্লাসিফিকেশনটা করা হয়েছে। প্রথমত হচ্ছে প্রোগ্রেশনের উপর ভিত্তি করে, দেন হচ্ছে ইনসিডেন্সের উপর ভিত্তি করে, এন্ড লাস্ট ওয়ান হচ্ছে বেজের উপর ভিত্তি করে। তো প্রোগ্রেশনের উপর ভিত্তি করে বেসিক্যালি তিন ভাগে ভাগ করা হয়েছে ট্যাক্সটাকে। সেটা হচ্ছে প্রোগ্রেসিভ ট্যাক্স, রিগ্রেসিভ ট্যাক্স এন্ড প্রপোর্শনাল ট্যাক্স। And in terms of incidence, there are basically let me move to next slide. Okay, there are basically two types of taxes, direct tax and indirect tax. And in terms of base, there are basically two types of taxes, single tax and multiple tax. So today we will be focusing on the progressivity taxes, though the types of tax in our country is regressive, but we will be trying to focus on the importance of progressivity of taxes and why should we adopt this policy to collect more revenue from the citizen. Okay, so here is a clear representation of the types of taxes. Here you can see there are three on the basis of progression, two on the basis of incidence, and two on the basis of base. Okay, so if you talk about the progression, then as I also already said, there are three types of taxes: progressive tax, regressive tax, and proportional tax. And if we plot these taxes in a graph where on the vertical there is amount of tax and on the horizontal axis there is income, then if we plot progressive tax, then we will have a curve like this one. Can you see my cursor, sir? Okay, sir. And if we plot regressive tax, then we will have a curve like this one. And if we plot proportional tax, then we will have a straight line. So if we talk about taking the derivative of income of tax in terms of income, that means tax by del income, then if we talk about regressive tax, then the first derivative will be positive as it is increasing, but the second derivative will be decreasing. That means the second derivative will be negative. That means it is increasing at a decreasing rate. And if we talk about progressive tax, then the first derivative will be also positive, but the second derivative will also be positive. That's why it is increasing at an increasing rate. And if we find out the derivative for proportional tax, then the first derivative will be positive and the second derivative will be zero, because it is increasing but at a constant rate. Okay, so if we talk about the sections of incidence, then we have already known that there are two types of taxes, direct tax and indirect tax. And if we just elaborate this, then direct tax basically paid by person, and person pays tax from own pocket. They paid from their own pocket. And if we talk about the example, then income tax is the appropriate example for direct tax. On the other hand, if we talk about indirect tax, then basically person collects tax from customers and then he or she pays to the government. and there are multiple taxes on in this segment. VAT, excise duty, custom duty, etc. are the examples of indirect tax. And here you can see in this figure, there is also a representation of these two taxes, where you can see consumer pays to government, and here you can see in terms of indirect tax, consumer pays it first to the manufacturer, and then manufacturer pays it to the government. So these are the classifications of tax in terms of incidence. Basically, why a government take tax from the citizen? So there are a few objective of tax, কেন এটাকে ইমপ্লিমেন্ট করা হয়। তো প্রথমত দেখতে পাচ্ছি আমরা যে প্রথমটা হচ্ছে কালেকশন অফ রেভিনিউ। অবভিয়াসলি একটা মেজর সোর্স অফ রেভিনিউ আর কালেক্টেড থ্রু ট্যাক্স, both direct and indirect tax. Then redistribution of income, economic development, increment of national income, full employment, economic control, and protection of industry. Here I have focused on three specific points: collection of revenue, redistribution of income, and economic control. Here redistribution of income is very important, and tax is one of the tools to ensure this, and progressivity will also be helpful in ensuring this aim of the government. We'll come back to this slide in future. Okay, what's about Bangladesh? বাংলাদেশের পার্সপেক্টিভে ইনকাম ট্যাক্সটা কেমন এন্ড ভ্যাটটা কেমন অ্যাপ্লাই করা হয়েছে, যদি আমরা বাংলাদেশের সাপেক্ষে দেখি, তাহলে বেসিক্যালি ইন ফিসক্যাল ইয়ার 2024 and 2025 ট্যাক্স ফ্রি ব্র্যাকেট সেট করা হয়েছে 3,50,000 টাকা। দ্যাট মিনস যাদের ইনকাম হচ্ছে 3,50,000 টাকা থেকে কম, দে ডোন্ট হ্যাভ টু pay any tax, income tax. And then gradually this rates increases, but it increases at a decreasing rate. Okay, so here you can see it increases proportionately, but it is a regressive tax rate. Okay, so the maximum amount of tax paid is 30%, and here is the problem, and today we are going to talk about this, why this is problematic structure, and how we can address this problem, and how we can get rid of this problem. Okay, if we talk about VAT, and then VAT stands for value added tax, and there is 15% VAT. So here is a problem. The person who earns 200 BDT daily, if we talk about that 15% VAT, then he or she has to pay 30 taka from his daily earning. That means he will have only 170 taka remaining in his hand to spend. And if we talk about a person whose income is nearly around 2,000 daily, then he or she has to pay 300 taka, and he will have 1,700 taka in his hand to spend. So there is a kind of discrimination here. It doesn't ensure the equality or equity. In fact, both the poor and the rich, they are paying the same amount of VAT, and this issue can be addressed. And if there could be a policy to address this problem, and to make the people pay according to their income level, then I think this problem can be solved. Okay, so objective of taxes. I have already talked about the problem regarding the VAT, and then there is a problem regarding the income tax. We can see that the initial tax bracket is 3,50,000 taka, and it is maximum at 30%. But the thing is, in a successive tax bracket, there is only increment of 5%. If we can make it a progressive tax structure, then the higher tier people, those who have high amount of earning each year, then they have to pay higher amount, and eventually this will help the government to generate more revenue from the citizen, and poor people, those people whose income is, you know, nearly to the poverty line, they have to pay, you know, less amount of money through VAT, and as there is a bracket in income tax, 3,50,000 taka, those who are near to this bracket, they have to pay less amount of money in the progressive taxation system, and those who earns more amount of money, then they have to pay higher amount of, have higher percentage of their money. So I think progressivity will be helping us in this regard, and that's all from my side. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shihab. You actually discussed number of issues. You also explained the different classification of taxation, the current income tax structure in Bangladesh, and the implication of indirect taxation on income. Thank you very much, Shihab.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sami, can you hear me? Sami Mohammed?
Sir, yes, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Yeah. So yeah, if you can take next 15 minutes to discuss your perspective.
Sir, can I share my screen?
I think we should be able to share this.
I'm trying. Mm. Is my screen visible? Thank you. My name is Sami Mohammed. I'm an undergraduate student of fourth year in the Department of Economics in Dhaka University. And today I'll be going over some broad issues of progressivity of tax structure in Bangladesh. Unlike my seniors, I unfortunately cannot provide you such a research-oriented and statistical purview of the problem. So I'll be moreover focusing on the policy suggestions that I've come across while looking into this issue, and general overview as per my limited abilities. Now, in Bangladesh, as explained by the previous presentations, mainly three types of taxes, other than the surcharges and import tariffs, are prevalent in Bangladesh. Income taxes largely focus upon brackets, which range from 3.5 lakhs exempt and up to then increasing at a 5% increase. And it also has many exemptions and deductions, and it according to agricultural income, sector specific and particular types of income are exempt from this. And also there is specific provision for marginal communities to have larger exemptions than the general public. In terms of corporate tax, there is different taxation in terms of whether a company is a sole proprietorship, whether it's publicly traded or whether it's not. So publicly traded companies have a lower taxation rate than non-publicly traded companies, which incentivizes initial public offerings to publicly list companies. And there are many exemptions and tax holidays provided through to corporations through a very fairly complicated bit of legislation, which is hard to navigate. And lastly, the most important one, which is value added tax, which is flat at 15%, but it is fairly complicated because of particular exemptions, and in some particular cases, there is source only VAT, which particularly tries to avoid double taxation and tries to only tax a particular product at a certain point of the value chain, right? Plus, it also excludes certain essential materials in order not to hinder the basic rights of people. Now, the concept is fairly simple. A progressive tax is a tax rate that increases based on the amount of taxable income. If your taxable income increases, the more rate, at a higher rate you are going to have to pay, right? So it has the positive impact of being based on ability to pay, which makes people's tax burdens much more easier. But it also has critics say that it has an impact of making the tax process much more complicated, which has an effect on tax compliance. That if it is particularly complicated, then tax payers may not find it very easy to comply with this taxation. Now, what are the measures that we use in order to see progressivity in taxation, right? So the first particular measure that is used uses the Gini index as a measure of inequality before and after tax to measure the income distributive effect of tax as a particular tax system, right? It also sees you can also see the elasticity of tax with respect to income, with higher elasticity exceeding 1 will give you a more progressive tax structure. There is also other measures which not particularly specifies progressivity in terms of the measurement, but it shows you progress in a tax structure internally by showing the difference between marginal and average tax rates. And the last thing that uses in particular is it uses Lorenz curve in order to form certain indices which can be interpreted to have a progressive impact, right? But in general, if you look at World Bank or any particular international organizations, they particularly depend on direct to indirect tax ratios, indirect taxes as percentage of tax revenue, indirect taxes as percentage of GDP. These are the measures that they use in order to capture a more general picture of whether tax structure is progressive or regressive. So in general, what we find is that indirect taxes are far more regressive than direct taxes, such as income tax. So therefore, VAT would be more regressive. So the percentage gives us a fair indicator whether a structure is regressive or progressive. Now, the main impacts of a progressive tax structure would be the redistributive effect, that it redistributes income based on social safety net programs. And Bangladesh recently has been going on a policy drive in order to expand the social safety net through pension schemes, through universal healthcare schemes, through expansion of stipends and etc. So, but without an associated rise in tax revenue. So this redistributive impact is something that progressive tax systems particularly help, because tax revenue increasing amount of tax revenue that you can get under progressive system is much higher than you can get under regressive systems. Now, tax efficiency, buoyancy, and compliance. Now, buoyancy is a concept that the more the growth happens in a country, the more tax revenue you can get out of it, right? So in Bangladesh, though it's doing fairly poor in terms of its tax to GDP ratio, but it's fairly buoyant, and it's the most buoyant among its neighboring countries, which means that the tax gross amount is increasing in a proportional or more than proportional rate to the GDP, right? So what's happening is that also the effect of progressivity on efficiency and compliance is also very important. In terms of progressivity, use of multiple brackets that layers your marginal tax rate based on complicated calculations may incentivize evasion and tax, like particular lobbying for tax avoidance, right? So this might have a negative effect on tax revenue collected if the marginal rate is too high. But in case of Bangladesh, the marginal rate being around 30% with comparative economies having much higher percentages, that particularly is not a concern. Also, the impact in terms of macroeconomics is particularly interesting because a progressive tax structure acts as an automatic stabilizer. So by having that lower tax burdens on people, it kind of alleviates the pains of inflation that a particular economy goes through, right? Now, the particular regressive elements of Bangladesh tax structure is that the indirect tax the dominance of indirect taxation in government revenue incentivizes an expansion of VAT. So government, when it cannot get like the ultra rich to comply with their particular tax ordinance, then they have an incentive to extract more out of the things that do work. So we have seen attempts at expanding VAT to private education. We've seen expansion of VAT to metro rail and etc. in recent times. So there's a particularly coercive incentive in order to expand VAT and make it more aggressive. Second of all, there is a very pervasive incentive in order to alleviate like tax evasion through the lack of compliance at higher levels of income, particularly. So what this does, it makes the system more regressive because the people who cannot evade, whose incomes are cut down when they get their salary, is particularly they cannot escape their particular fate, and the most of the tax burden falls upon them. And lastly, the lack of indexation of brackets in terms of inflation. So if the tax brackets are not subject to, since they're not subject to inflation, then the undue burden on income the undue burden of taxation is affecting those on the lower income scale by not incorporating inflation, which acts as a tax as well on those particularly poor households. There's also political dynamic to progressive taxation, in particularly tax reform. The losers, the people who are threatened by tax reforms, are generally more very organized politically, and they're very politically influential. They have more grip on policy making than people who particularly stand to gain from progressive taxation, like marginal communities, like disabled people, like people from backward communities economically and socially. They are much less organized and cannot lobby for their progressive taxation policies that they want, right? And lastly, what are the scopes of reform? I would have very simple suggestions, which would be focusing on increasing direct taxation, reducing VAT, or making VAT based on ability to pay, making the tax brackets flexible to inflation, and smoothing over the tax collection process in order to enhance the collection process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your interesting talk. So now we have listened to our feedback. Now, any one of you want to add something, or if you want to ask a question, since it appears that all these three panelists have done so instead. So, yeah, now you can make your own comment or observation, or you can ask any question, or anything you'd like to say. Let me share my understanding. So, this is that about very high level question. So, what we can see that the income inequality And one of the graphs that Rafsan showed earlier, in recent HIS data, it shows that the income share of the top 5%, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and the bottom 5%, both these groups in income share have increased in 2022 compared to 2016. So what does it imply? It implies the middle income, the মধ্য আয়ের যে গ্রুপটা সেটা কিন্তু আস্তে আস্তে ডিসঅ্যাপিয়ার হয়ে যাচ্ছে। তো বাংলাদেশে যে একটা রোবাস্ট একটা মধ্যম আয়ের একটা বড় একটা অংশ ছিল, সেটা কিন্তু এখন অনেকে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে তাদের আয় কমে কমে তারা একেবারে লো ইনকামে চলে যাচ্ছে, অথবা এর মধ্যে যারা খুব ফরচুনেট দে আর রাইজিং আপ টু হাই ইনকাম। So the middle income group is there. And definitely the tax structure in Bangladesh is responsible to a large extent. So if you look at the, if you consider the tax structure, so one thing is repeatedly mentioned in many talks, that indirect taxation, the government depends heavily on indirect taxation. So why indirect taxation is bad? So by indirect taxation, we mean that tax on commodity in the form of VAT or excise duty or import duty. So since the incidence is not certain, and since the lower income group is spend larger fraction of their income on those necessities or goods and services, then the larger burden of these indirect taxes fall on lower income. So that's why in general indirect taxation is bad for income distribution. Another thing is that even income direct taxation, income tax or corporate taxation, those are also important to design in such a way such that Sami also mentioned that the inflation need to be taken into account, and also whether the tax system allows or encourage tax avoidance, tax integration. So this type of issues, if cannot be minimized, then the people who are supposed to pay larger share of tax, they will always be left out, or they will always find way to not paying their fair share. Also income taxation, if you think about the direct taxation, we only think about income tax. But another important, I think, if you look at the people who are getting rich in Bangladesh, or the generation or the generational wealth accumulated mainly through the property value. If you look at the people who have become rich, you find most of them actually because their father or grandfather or forefathers used to have a lot of land, probably in large cities, and now this land becomes so valuable, its prices go up so much that they become extremely wealthy. But the thing is that in Bangladesh, the current tax structure does not have any provision to regularly evaluate the land value, and there is no provision of having some fee or some tax when you have like transferring your asset from parents to their children or to their grandchildren. And even if there is some inheritance tax, I think, but it's very minimal. But it's also based on like paper value, and we all know that the paper value of land is extremely low in Bangladesh. So that's why the income distribution becoming extremely unequal, because property tax, inheritance tax, liquid tax are not well structured. And people actually find a way to actually transfer, avoid tax, and accumulate as much as wealth as it possible through these properties, and then transfer it to the next generation. And in this way, the generational wealth accumulation is happening, and income inequality. So these are some other issues we need to think about when we are talking about the tax structuring. But well done. Thank you to all these three panelists. They studied the subject, they thought about it, they shared their thoughts. We appreciate it. So I think rather than typing the question here, I think we can actually do open discussion here right now. So I can see there are some questions. Uh, so Maruf Rahman Sugar. So Maruf Rahman Sugar saying that what can be some ways of expanding the collecting of unit tax? Sorry, Maruti Rahman, right? I'm extremely sorry. I'm just having migraine pain and I can't read it. So, yeah, any one of the panelists, since you have done some study, uh, some of you already mentioned how we can actually increase the direct taxation. Any other ways? I also talked about that there are some of these areas where we need to be focused more. If you want to raise more revenue for the government, and also if you want to make our income distribution more equal. But if any one of you want to add anything, please feel free. And I think Hussain asked a question to Rafsan. Rafsan, can you elaborate why Rangpur, despite being the poorest region in Bangladesh,
Hello.
bears the highest burden of indirect taxation? Yeah,
Hello.
Rafsan.
Yes, sir. Oh, so thank you, Hussein bhai, for the question. So let me clarify the methodology behind creating this map. So I have already mentioned that I used HIS, Household Income and Expenditure Survey 2016 for that map. So here, first of all, we calculated the amount of VAT for each household. Also, we calculated the income for each household. And then we calculated the VAT share in terms of income. And we already know that in 2016, Rangpur was considered as one of the lower income rural districts. So due to their lower income, it shows that the poorest region has the highest VAT burden. So their income is lower and their VAT burden is also higher. So that's why it showed more.
Yeah, Hussein, hence we were discussing this issue that if if you have like very few income, you need to spend it on food and other basic necessities. And if, say, for example, for cleaning product, for other important products, especially those are like value added, if it is value added, then there is a value added tax. That means it doesn't matter whether the person's income is 100 taka or 1 lakh taka. If that individual buys that product, he needs to pay that value added tax. So that means that if your income is very low, you are spending most of your income on necessities, and especially if those products are value added in some form, then you are paying the value added tax. But if you are very wealthy, you may not be spending your whole income on consumption. You spend on saving, you spend on entertainment and all other issues. many of these may not be like you are paying tax, any form of indirect tax. So generally, indirect tax is disproportionately uh, burdened lower income people, which is reflected in that Bangladesh map. You can see that there is a two cluster. One is Rangpur division, the other one is Borishal and Road division. And in 2022 HIS, Borishal division is the poorest division. Rangpur, the northeast is still one of the poorest regions. But you can see that this fact, this theoretical prediction nicely match with Bangladesh. That lower income people face higher proportion of indirect tax. There was another question. Sami said that in terms of under invoicing, what would be the policy approach? That's a very difficult question. So, and this is also an important question since we are having a persistent foreign exchange crisis and also this invoicing, uh, under invoicing or over invoicing malpractices. So the issue is uh, it's I don't think that there is a way where perfectly uh, you can perfectly stop these invoicing malpractices. But the thing is that uh, if you have like different distorted incentives, so for example, uh, if you have like multiple exchange rates, that actually encourages, I think, invoicing malpractice. And if you have like restriction on consumption, or if you are not freely consume your income within a country, then you actually uh, take those steps to launder money through invoicing or other forms. So the thing is that this cannot be stopped, and ultimately, if you are patriot enough, uh, so sorry, I don't know actually is there any economic policy that can actually uh, stop these invoicing practices. And the other measure that can be taken, which would be extremely costly, say for example, if you want to investigate whether these malpractices are there or not, then you need to again spend lot of revenue to establish a specialized department to investigate those all those transactions, and whether that would be economically uh, efficient or not is another issue. But Bangladesh Customs do uh, have some mechanism which is like even if you announce some price, Bangladesh Customs will not take it. They'll actually look at the price for past 3 months for this whatever product you're importing or whatever things you're trying to export. Basically for it goes both for export and import. And then they try to reassess the value. And sometimes it's actually detrimental for export and import. From my experience, some businessmen actually said that even though they are like reporting very honestly their pricing on customs, but sometimes customs officials uh, don't accept it and they just randomly impose whatever value they think is appropriate. So I guess there is, I mean, if you want to lower type 1 error, then if type 2 error will go up. So yeah, it is it's a very complicated problem, and I don't think that there is any straightforward solution. Anyway, thank you. Interesting question. So, any other thing or anything you'd like to share on asking question? Okay, interesting discussion. Thank you, all three panelists. Let us end it, but before that, I would like to hear from our so if you have some concluding remarks.
না দিন খুবই ভালো ডিসকাশন হচ্ছে, ডিফারেন্ট পার্সপেক্টিভে তিনজন ইকোনমিস্টের কাছ থেকে আমরা শুনলাম। মানে মেইনলি যে প্রগ্রেসিভিটি সেটি হচ্ছে ইনইকুয়ালিটিকে আসলে অ্যাডজাস্ট করে, প্লাস হচ্ছে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় ট্যাক্স অ্যাডজাস্টমেন্টের কিন্তু সুযোগ থাকে। যেমন বাইরে দেখবা তারা কিন্তু যেমন ইংল্যান্ডে 50,000 পাউন্ডের উপরে যদি তার ইনকাম হয় বছরে, তাকে কিন্তু অ্যারাউন্ড 47% মতো তাকে ট্যাক্স দিতে হয়। স্ক্যান্ডিনেভিয়ান কান্ট্রিগুলোতে 55% দিতে হয়। অন দ্য আদার হ্যান্ড সেখানে দেখবে যে ফুড আইটেম যেগুলো আছে বা একদম নেসেসারি যে সমস্ত আইটেম গুলো আছে সেখানে কোনো ভ্যাট থাকে না, অথবা মানে তারা জিএসটি বলে সেগুলো থাকে না, একদম কম, যাতে সবার একটা ইয়ের মধ্যে থাকে, আওতার মধ্যে থাকে। তো এই ট্যাক্স স্ট্রাকচারটা আসলে সেইভাবেই সাজানো উচিত। আমাদের দেশে হলো অনেকটা উল্টা, এখনো দেখা যাচ্ছে যে আমরা ইনডিরেক্ট ট্যাক্সের উপর বেশি পরিমাণে ডিপেন্ড করছি। তো দেখা যাচ্ছে একজন সাধারণ মানুষ, একজন রিক্সাওয়ালা, সেও কিন্তু আসলে ট্যাক্স দিচ্ছে। সে প্রত্যেকটা জিনিস কিনতে গেলে সেখানে ভ্যাট আছে। তো সেই জায়গাটা থেকে আসলে আমাদের বের হয়ে আসতে হবে। তো আমরা ডিফারেন্ট পার্সপেক্টিভে এবং কোর ইকোনমিক অ্যানালিসিস গুলো আমরা দেখেছি এখানে আলোচনার মধ্যে আসছে। তিনজনের আলোচনায় ডিফারেন্ট, তিনজনই একই টপিকের উপর ভিন্নভাবে উপস্থাপন করেছে, উইচ ইজ ভেরি ইন্টারেস্টিং। আমার মনে হয় আমাদের যারা ইয়াং রিসার্চার তারা উপকৃত হবে এবং তারা বেনিফিটেড হবে, and they will be encouraged to present or to deliver their speech as a discussion in the coming years as well, or in the near future. তো সেই জায়গা থেকে আমি আবারও ধন্যবাদ জানাই আমাদের তিনজন প্যানেলিস্টকে চমৎকার প্রেজেন্টেশন দেওয়ার জন্য এবং তাদের যে রিমার্কস দেওয়ার জন্য, এবং সেখানে ইকোনমিক্সের যে থিওরিটিক্যাল নলেজটা তার অ্যাপ্লিকেশনটাও আমরা সেখানে কিন্তু দেখলাম কিভাবে অ্যাপ্লাই করা যাচ্ছে। তো সেটাই হচ্ছে আসলে ইকোনমিক্সের মেইন অ্যাডভান্টেজ, যেটা আমাদের রিয়েল লাইফের সাথে খুব রিলেটেড। অর্থাৎ হোয়াট এভার উই আর স্টাডিং ইন দ্য থিওরি, এটার অ্যাপ্লিকেশনটা খুব ভিজিবল। তো সেই জায়গা থেকে আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাই তিনজনকে ফর দেয়ার ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট অ্যান্ড পার্টিনেন্ট and well articulated remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Shihab, Sami, and Afsan, for your time and for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good night, and see you in our next level. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
এবং ওরা যদি আমাদের রিসার্চে এনগেজ হতে চায়, মোস্ট ওয়েলকাম।
তোমাদের যদি কারো ইন্টারেস্টিং পেপার থাকে বা ইভেন ওয়ার্ক প্রোগ্রেস থাকে,
আমাদের কোনো রিসার্চের সাথেও এনগেজ হতে পারে।
ঠিক আছে, থ্যাংক ইউ সবাইকে।
Good night, sir.